Hello and welcome back to the Find Your Peak Fitness podcast where fitness meets real life. I'm your coach and host Megan Morensky, and today we're going to take a deep dive into strategies for bouncing back after an off-plan meal. I'm going to keep this one nice and short and sweet. I do try aim to get the episodes between 20 to 30 minutes. I know that previous episode on gaining muscle as a female did go over time, so apologies for that. This one, I promise you, I'm going to keep it within that 20 to 30 minute range. So with that being said, let's dive straight into it. So we've all been there. We've all had that meal or the weekend where things didn't quite go to plan. And yes, even coaches, even trainers, even competitors go off plan sometimes. In preparation for this episode, it made me reflect a lot on my entire journey into the fitness space and where it actually all began. And my first ever diet. It made me really reflect on my first ever diet. And I remember when I must have been about 14 or 15, and I grew up in Scotland, so this is back in Scotland, and I decided to go on my first ever diet, and I had no concept on calories, protein, strength training. I didn't go to the gym. I did like any 14 or 15-year-old kid would do in Scotland. I went to school, I hung out with my friends, we cycled our bikes quite a lot, met at the park, whatever. Yes, alcohol was slowly creeping into the picture at that age. But I remember wanting to lose weight. So I went on a diet and naturally I just ate less. I didn't track my food. If I could go back, I probably would guess I was eating about 1,000 to 1,200 calories per day. And I remember I begged my mum to buy me the Slim Fast shakes and I would drink them and obviously still be hungry afterwards. And I think that lasted about a week. And I remember for my lunches, I used to, instead of going out for lunch every day, so I grew up in the city, we used to go out for lunch every day at school, so we're getting things like, cheese and ham toasties and going to Sainsbury's and getting a packet of cookies and stuff like that. So I decided to pack my own lunch, because that means I can control what I'm eating. And I used to take a can of Heinz tomato soup, and I would make it in the morning and then put it in a flask and take that to school, and that was my lunch. I had no idea how many calories in Heinz tomato soup. If I could guess, it's probably about 200 calories. I could be off there. But that was my lunch. So a 200 to 300 calorie lunch, if that. Breakfast, I remember I'd have like one sachet of the Quaker porridge. So for people in the States, that's oatmeal. And it was the golden syrup one. And that's all I would have. So like breakfast would be a sachet of Quaker golden syrup oats, mixed with water, and then lunch was a tin of Heinz tomato soup, and then dinner was whatever my mum was making. When I was this age, I did not eat any vegetables. The only fruit I would eat would be bananas, and that was it. And 2, I did not go to the gym. My form of exercise, I played a lot of football growing up, so it's soccer, again for people in the States. Played a lot of football growing up, so that was my exercise. I also walked to school and back every day, which is about a 40-minute walk there and back. Each way. So that was my exercise, a lot of kind of cardio based. But the one thing I remember, like I said, I was hungry all the time. And even as a 14 to 15-year-old girl, I was on during the week. So Monday to Friday when I was at school, I was in my routine. I had my breakfast, I had my lunch, I had my dinners, and I was good. I remember when I was sitting in my room on a Friday night and my mum had made us dinner. I remember my godmother was over and we were all hanging out, and I went upstairs to my room, and I remember I was still hungry after dinner, and I had this big bar of chocolate that my brother had gave me for Christmas. It was one of those big bars of Cadbury's chocolate. And I remember thinking, I'll just have one square. So I had one square, which turned into 2, and that soon turned into 4. And I remember thinking okay, I'll just have one more roll. And before I knew it, it turned into a binge. I lost control, my body was starving. And as soon as I had that one bit of chocolate, that little spike in dopamine, I remember just losing control. And I remember I don't know how much I ate, but it was a lot of chocolate. I remember feeling really sick afterwards, physically felt sick, but also really guilty. And I felt shameful. And looking back now, I didn't know what a binge was. I didn't know what eating disorders really were. I knew what anorexia was, but it was also, I'd been so sheltered from that. I'd never seen anyone suffer from that. So I did not realise that one instant what that could have spiraled into. And it's quite scary to look at, especially for someone that's so young. But it's very much prevalent in today's society. There's a lot of teenage girls out there, some of them may even be listening and that can relate to this. But yes, I remember feeling overwhelmed with guilt and shame. I didn't tell anyone. Like I said, I didn't really know what was going on. And I just decided to bounce back the next day. But that day didn't work out. I remember we were going to like my grandma's, I think. And obviously when you go to your grandma, she's force feeding you cookies and everything. So like I said, I had a big sweet tooth. So I remember it was like a wipeout, and telling myself I would start again on Monday. And this happened for a while. Like I was going through this like Monday to Friday, being really quote unquote good. And then the weekends were just like a total mess up. And then it got to the point, like I almost just like, I just gave up. You know, I was sick and tired of failing all the time. And I was like, I'm just going to go back to eating how I was before. And I did. And bearing in mind, when I was a teenager, I was never overweight. But I do, like looking back now, I do think I had a lot of insecurities with how I look. And a lot of that fed into, you know, my early 20s. It was still kind of there. It kind of fed through my entire teenage years. But some weeks, some months were better than others. Until it really hit me in my early 20s, which I've mentioned before. That's when I lost a bunch of weight and I was very much like what I thought in control of what I was doing. So anyway, that's my first initial interaction with, I guess, quote unquote, going off plan. Okay, not that I had much of a plan back then, but so story time over. I wanted to share a personal story of mine just so I can relate to those listening. My aim for this is, by the end of this episode, I want you to know exactly how to reset. So when you do mess up or go off plan, I want you to have this ability, this skill to reset without guilt, without shame, without the I'll start Monday again. It's knowing that, okay, this happened, this is what I'm going to do next. These are the skills I have in place that when this happens, I am good. And you limit the damage. And you also relieve yourself of those negative emotions that can really spiral very, very quickly. Okay, so first off, let's actually define what an off-plan meal is. So this can be a period of time, so it can be one meal, it can be a day, it can be a weekend, but it's where your eating patterns are unlike your usual eating routine. And I want to break this down into two scenarios, okay? So the first scenario, you have unstructured eating. And then the other scenario is the loss of control eating. So the unstructured eating is your special occasions. You're on holiday, you're at a birthday party, you're at a wedding. The loss of control eating is the binge, this, starting over Monday, where you have loss of control. It may be a symptom of diet fatigue, restrictive dieting, but it's where you lose that sense of control while you're eating, okay? So that's the two things. We've got unstructured eating, which is your special occasions, and your loss of control eating, okay? So that's where, like I said, the binge restrictive cycle, okay? What most people do when these things occur, especially the loss of control eating, is they overcorrect. So what this looks like, you mess up, so you have more food than you planned, or you had too many slices of cake, or whatever the scenario is. The overcorrection is you're going to exercise harder. So that typically looks in the form of cardio. So you're going to get up tomorrow morning, you do 2 hours on the treadmill before work. And you're also going to restrict your food intake, or you may even fast. So there's two overcorrections, okay? So you go from being on your diet, quote unquote on your diet, to having an off-plan meal or weekend or scenario. And now you overcorrect and you're restricting and you're beating up your body. You're feeling guilty. And also your motivation is shame. You're shaming yourself into doing that thing, okay? And this is a slippery slope to go down. It leads to a vicious cycle of binge restrict or overeat and overcorrect, also known as yo-yo dieting. So you're on your diet, you're off your diet. What this does is reinforces failure. You're always, you're on and you're off, but you're always failing. And eventually you just end up giving up. And understandably so. No one likes to feel like they're failing. It's got to be something that's long-term, sustainable, and that's where the lifestyle aspect comes in. Just reinforcing these behaviours you're bound to give up. And like I said, understandably so. So what can we do to prevent this? Let's first look at special occasions. So this is your holidays, your weddings, your weekends. If loss of control occurs, so if you're at a wedding and you plan, I'm only going to do this or eat this or drink this, and it doesn't quite go to plan, how do we counteract that? Or how can we even prepare for that? So I briefly just mentioned this, but having a plan, that is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you, is having a plan before you go into these things. No, you're never going to know exactly what is there. So let's just say you're going to a wedding. You're never going to know exactly what is there, but you have a good idea. What you can do beforehand is a strategy I like to call protein fasting. So that's leading up to that wedding. You consume predominantly lean sources of protein, lots of fibre, so fruits and veggies, and save the bulk of your calories and your macros for that event. This is a strategy I use a lot. It is very effective, and it takes away the feeling of, I have to restrict in order to enjoy myself at this event. It also minimises the risk of binging at this event. Being overly restrictive is one of the main things of causing an off-plan meal or binge. A good mental strategy I use as well is reminding myself that everything in moderation is perfectly fine. That 10th slice of cake will never be as good as the first. That first slice of cake is always so enjoyable, but the more you have, it starts to get less and less enjoyable. And that's because our bodies know that we don't need it. We do not need that 10th slice of cake. Now, if something like this does occur where we do overeat on a special occasion or a weekend or a holiday, you may want to avoid weighing yourself the next day. What this does, when we overeat, we hold on to, one, the extra volume of the food, the sodium in it, and also we hold on to a lot of water weight. So it's very easy to weigh in the next day an extra 2-3 pounds more than your maintained weight. If this is a trigger for people, then just totally avoid weighing in for the next few days. And it's once you get back in routine, your weight will just come down pretty quick. Like I said, it's mostly water weight, some inflammation, a lot of sodium as well. A common misconception is when people look at that scale weight, they think they've gained 2 or 3 or 4 pounds of body fat, and that is just impossible. It's impossible to do that within a day. There's 3,500 calories surplus, that's above your maintenance, that you would need to eat to gain 1 pound of fat, and no one can do that in one sitting. I mean, you could, there's challenges out there, but even then our bodies are not that quick to respond to that and to turn it into fat. Yes, you will store some of it as fat, but not all. It's not 1 pure pound of body fat. Moving on, let's talk about what would happen if we have a loss of control eating. So that's where we may eat in private, we may sit and binge on certain things, consume higher calorie foods, higher palatable foods. So that's your typically higher carb, higher fat. Things like cakes, peanut butter is a very popular one, as this is very high in calories and fat, and it also is very highly palatable. Most people reach for those processed foods. Now, when binges occur or excessive overeating occurs under a lack of controlled state, this can be caused by various things. So when we are in a fat loss phase, there is a point where you may become diet fatigued. Now, what does this look like? Diet fatigue is a state of exhaustion. There's a loss of motivation there. You may have low energy all the time. You're always hungry. Now, there are some situations where this is expected, so contest prep is one of them. However, for the average person who's just wanting to lose body fat successfully, they may want to assess where they're at. So that's assessing their current intake of foods, their rate of loss, so how much body fat have they actually lost, and how long have they been dieting. It's very, very common for people to diet way too long, and that's why rebounds can happen. So a diet phase, like I said, depending on the person, but typically they're about 8 to 12 weeks dieting phase, and then it's important to have some form of either maintenance or surplus in there. So that could look like entering a deload, so that's deload with training and also bringing calories up to maintenance. This helps get your hormones regulated again and also get your hunger regulated. When you're dieting, your leptin levels are very, very low and your ghrelin is very, very high. So what that means is you feel hungry a lot of the time, and it's because your body is sending signals that you're hungry. Your fat cells are not full enough, so it's sending signals for you to eat. Okay, so when this happens for too long, your body's bound to get to a state where it can't do this anymore. It has to bring some sort of calories in, and that's where rebounds can happen. Dr. Mike Israetel, he does a really good explanation on this, and he's got this theory called the hedonic staircase, and this describes how much pleasure food brings you. So what he states is the bottom part of the staircase is you at like the beginning of a diet, okay? So you're well fed, your body fat is at a healthy state, or possibly unhealthy, but it's at a high enough state where you're not hungry 24/7. The bottom part of the staircase is having things where food doesn't really bring you that much pleasure. I mean, it's enjoyable and you eat to survive, but you're not thinking about it all the time. It doesn't consume a lot of mental energy, and that once you enter a dieting phase, the more time spent in that dieting phase, the higher up the staircase you go. And the closer you get to the top of the staircase, that's where you're very, very food focused. Food brings you a lot of pleasure. You're thinking about it a lot. Your leptin levels are extremely low and your ghrelin is totally through the roof. One thing that I like to think about is if you're in a well-fed state, peanut butter, which is again highly, very, very, very palatable, doesn't really stimulate you. You're kind of like, yeah, like it's nice, it's there, but If you're in a dieting phase, like say if you're contest prep or deep in a dieting phase, peanut butter, when you think about it, it makes you drool. It's almost like crack. You can't stop thinking about it, and if you did go near that peanut butter jar, you probably would not be able to stop. We never want to get to that point. Like I said, unless you're in contest prep, and even then, I don't know if you want to be that close. You should never feel like peanut butter is crack. You should always feel like peanut butter is tasty, and there might be some days where it brings you a bit more pleasure, but it should never be extremely highly stimulating. The hedonic staircase is a good representation of never really being at the bottom level and never really being at the top. You want to be somewhere in between. And there's going to be points where you will be nearer the top, and there's going to be points when you're kind of near the bottom. If you're in a building phase, yeah, you should expect to be near the bottom, where food is just not that pleasurable. You're eating to build. You're well fed. You're not really thinking about it much. Like I said, if you're in a dieting phase, you're a little bit more a little bit more food focused. A good strategy that may help you with this if you are in a dieting phase is having in diet breaks or refeed days. So diet breaks is a period of time where you take your foot just slightly off the gas. So you increase your calories a little bit, maybe bring them up to maintenance, and it just gives your body time to regulate. You can do this for structured weeks. So let's say if you go in a dieting phase for 8 weeks, you may have a diet break for 2 weeks. And you could schedule this in. You can time it with, say, holiday season, or if you're going on. And refeed days, I like to incorporate them once a week. So Saturday's my refeed day. All this looks like is protein is slightly less, about 10 grams less than my daily intake. Fats are a little bit increased, and it's mostly a higher carb day. This gives me 1 day a week where I can replenish my glycogen stores, just fill my body up with good, nutritious foods, and just decrease my kind of hunger focus or my food focus. And it just kind of keeps me in that good sweet spot, so I'm not getting too near that top step in the hedonic staircase. I love this as, yes, it gives my body a break and kind of regulates things, but especially mentally. Dieting, can be very mentally taxing. You're always thinking about, you're planning out your meals, and then when you are hungry, you're kind of fighting that hunger. You're telling yourself like, okay, like let's just go distract someone. Let's go have a kind of diet soda. Let's go for a walk. And you're kind of trying to distract yourself, especially when hunger starts to creep up more and more and more. But having a refeed day just totally gives your body that almost like reset. And the good thing is that it's every 6 days. So I love refeed days. It's definitely something I recommend. Like I said, diet breaks, you can kind of combine the two. Just make sure that when you are doing this, you are having a plan in place, you are tracking everything, so it's not like my refeed day is when I can just go totally off the rails. That's what a cheat day is, and I do not like cheat days. I hate the word, I hate the whole concept behind it. Refeed days are slightly different. They're still very much within a threshold, and you are still in that control, and you know what's happening, you know what to expect, and you're nourishing your body. Cheat days, you're not. You're just giving your body, or you think you're giving your body a free pass to just have everything you want. And that's essentially what it is, but it doesn't do you any good. And it can certainly lead to some unhealthy eating habits and also stall your progress. And may even go back. You may even go backwards after a cheat day, depending how bad it is. So what should you do following an off-plan meal? So as soon as that happens, what should you do? The first thing I want you to do is pause. I want you to take a minute and legitimately register what has just happened. What this allows us to do is bring awareness. If we do that thing, so if we do the off-plan meal and we just ignore it and continue going on, we're missing an opportunity to learn. So we need to pause and maybe sit there and admit to ourselves like, damn, like what the heck just happened? This whole dieting thing, this is kind of hard. Like I feel guilty I just did that. I feel shamed. Why did I just do that? But allowing yourself to sit there and recognize it is the first thing I want you to do. Once you've admitted how you feel and that you messed up and dieting is hard, I want you to give yourself grace. So give yourself grace by being like, it's okay. This is hard, but I'm still going to keep on trying. It does us no good to sit there and just dwell and beat ourselves up. We need to be nice to ourselves. If you ever dropped your phone, do you immediately pick it up and start smashing it to pieces just because you dropped it? No, you pick it up and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm checking for cracks and wiping the dust off. And you're like, oh my goodness, thank God it didn't smash. But yet when it comes to our diet, we go off the rails for one meal and we just say, screw it. And then we just keep smashing our phones. So that's the first 2 steps. You're going to pause. You're going to give yourself grace. The next thing is you're going to do something that you think is healthy. Okay, so that could be going for a walk. It could be drinking a green tea. It could be drinking a protein shake. It could be having an apple. It could be meditating. It could be phoning a friend, but something that you view as healthy, something small, something very, very small. This does not mean go on the treadmill for 2 hours. This is something small that is easy for you to do, that you think is healthy. The last thing I want you to do is write it down. So write down what happened, write down how you feel, what you did afterwards. This makes it real. Or better yet, tell someone. Tell your trainer, tell your coach, tell a family member that you trust, tell a friend, someone in your support system that can bring you back to that positive place. Okay, they can give you some positive reinforcement. They can be like, it's okay, like you messed up. Like, I remember when I did this, and you can relate to people and they'll give you that support you need. So that's the 4 steps I want you to do. You're going to pause, you're going to give yourself grace, you're going to do something healthy, something easy, and you're going to write it down or you're going to tell someone about what happened and how you feel. These strategies are really good. However, I'm not going to take credit for them. I would like to give the credit to Mind Pump. Mind Pump do a tremendous job of teaching trainers and coaches how to be good trainers and coaches. I've learned a lot from them before I even became a trainer. So I would like to give them credit for this strategy of bouncing back after an off-plan meal. A few mindset tricks that you can start practicing before you even start on a dieting phase or fitness journey is you need to ditch the all or nothing mindset. Nothing good comes from being all in or all out. We've got to always have the dimmer switch on. You also need to start viewing health as a lifestyle. So if you are someone that finds that you do have this restrictive diet and you tend to mess up quite frequently, then it's time to reassess. When it comes to dieting or living a healthy lifestyle, it shouldn't be too taxing. So, like I said, if you are continuously failing, you need to reassess your approach to this entire fitness journey. It needs to be relatively easy to adhere to, and it should fit with your lifestyle. If it doesn't, then like I said, you need to reassess and find a different approach. If you are someone that is working with a trainer or a coach already, make sure that you are communicating with them. They likely have the tools that will help you, and they are your support system. They are holding you accountable. So make sure you are totally open and honest with them and communicate as effectively as you can. A good trainer or coach should be finding out what works for you. Okay, so all of my clients are totally different. They have totally different goals, they have totally different motivations, they have totally different bodies. So a good trainer or coach should find out exactly what makes you tick and what doesn't. They should also know that success is different. It's something I learned pretty early on, is that success looks different for every single client. Yes, weight loss gets a lot of praise. You see the before and afters and you're like, I'm going to hire them because look at all these before and afters. But some of my biggest transformations have been not visual. So it's not the weight loss client. It's having the client that was a victim to the scale for years, and they viewed food as the demon. They felt guilty and shameful every time they ate or they went off track, and they were obsessed with the scale. So having a client that is free from all that is a huge success. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean that it's not successful. And a good trainer or coach should be working with the client and not necessarily providing them with what works for them. I would never give my client exactly what I do. I use tools that work for me. And I work with a coach and he gives me strategies and tips that I need that work for me. And a good coach should be doing that with their clients. So that's why you need to work with someone that doesn't just have this generic program or generic meal plan. You need to work with someone that's going to help you and coach you. The emphasis on the word coach. They need to coach you through this journey. That being said, I'm going to wrap up the episode there. If you are interested in coaching, then head to the Summit Coaching Instagram page, link below, and send me a message or use the link in my bio and fill out an application, and I can get you started on your fitness journey. Like I said, with coaching, you'll be working with myself and it'll be totally customized to suit your needs. I will get you where you are now and get you where you want to be. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please give it a 5-star review, share it with your friends on social media, and please reach out if you have any questions or topics you want me to cover. Make sure you subscribe. The more subscriptions, the more followings I get, the more listeners we can bring in to our circle. So make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe, share it with your friends. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next episode.